that's me with my 1,000 followers. As you can see, I'm a huge social media influencer, getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars per tweet. Yeah, they got to get my notes. And I hate Magento too. No notes. Fuck it, I'll wing it. Okay. I hate Magento too. So how many other people in this room hate Magento too? Did Ben make it down here yet? Oh, there he is. Okay. You're not licensed to carry, no concealed permits. Marcia, did you frisk him for sharp objects before he came in? Okay. So, how many people here love Magento 1? Who still loves Magento 1? Okay. How many people are going to stay with Magento 1 after the end of life, June 2020? Adobe Magento, close your eyes. It's a cone of silence. No, I've heard a lot of people talking about how they hate Magento too. So on Magento 1, what was the first version where you thought, this is cool, this is stable, like it's solid, it's reliable, I like it, this is my version, like, which one was, just say it out loud, like, go ahead. 1.7? 1.4. 1.4, okay. Any 1.3s? 0.8. 0.8. 1.7. A lot of people said 1.7 was the one. I did hear other responses. Some people said, oh, it was 1.3, 0.1, 0.2, 0.4, 0.5. Everybody had like a specific version where it was like their gold standard that they really loved. Aaron Bonner, he says, well, it is relative. We started at pre-1, but 1.3 is the point where my swear jar stopped filling up. And I think it is relative. It's relative to where you started. That's my co-founder, Martin Paschal. He's posing beside a neatly racked, proudly posing beside a neatly labeled and racked servers that I racked, I labeled, and I cabled. Martin's he's the best co-founder you could possibly ask for. So Magento 1, it had all these struggles, so many struggles. Everybody was saying it's complex, it's difficult, it's hard to use, it's over-engineered, this is a steep learning curve, the performance is terrible. And at the time, I was working on an email marketing company, and I built an extension to integrate with Magento. And through that, I got to learn the internals of it and understand that it does have a lot of performance constraints and bottlenecks. So what we did was we said, let's take the knowledge that we have of Magento, let's take the latest technologies, SSDs, virtualization, and let's create the ultimate hosting platform for this with good support. Because I was going out and I was having to install my extension at other hosting providers, and they really didn't understand it. They didn't know how to tune the stack. They didn't know the changes that had to be made. It was just unlike anything that they had ever seen at the time. So we got together and we created what was called MHM. And we learned it, and it went really well, and things were going good. And up until about 1.7, it was pretty well figured out. I think all the other hosts figured it out. You could go anywhere, you could host it. The support was there. The hosts were really supporting it well. We knew the bugs. We could trace the application flow through, see the performance bottlenecks, and we could understand and really help the customers with it. And by that time, developers got really friendly with it. They got to know it. They got to understand it. And things were going well. Things were going well. But then Magento 2 came out. And Magento 2 was really just vaporware. It was, yeah, Magento 2 is a thing. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. It never came until finally it did drop, and it had to drop into GA. I remember Paul Boisvert. He was at Magento Live Europe, and he dropped the mic, and Magento 2 is shipped. Magento 2 is shipped, and the crowd went mild. We all knew like it wasn't ready. We all knew it wasn't ready, but you had to get it out. You know, you had to get Magento 2 out before anyone else would touch it. Because as a hosting provider, like, we were just, yeah, whatever, it's Magento 2, that's years away. We didn't really want to mess with it, but in order to really get it going, you had to release it to GA, and you had to get in there and get working with it and get the community. You know, you have to get the community, you have to get the extension providers, everybody has to come in and work together to make it a success. And that's why we built Mojo Stratus 3. So Mojo Stratus 3 was, we said, okay, Magento 1, you could just upload a file, clear cache, hit refresh, it's fine. It's all good. You can see your changes. With Magento 2, there's new challenges in the hosting industry where customers are figuring out, okay, I want a local development environment. I have to do all these builds. I have to build front end. I have to build back end. I have to publish, compile. So we built Mojo Stratus 3 to solve the local development issues, CI/CD deployment. And again, this is the timeline where we stepped up and built something that you really needed to make Magento run successfully. But why? Why was there a Magento 2? Why was there a Magento 2? Think back to that time when it was talking about coming and it was going to be released, and everybody, I don't remember the messaging. I can't tell you. Can anybody tell me? Who was there at the time? Do you remember any messaging about Magento 2? Ben, help us out maybe? Yeah, come on. You can be my co-presenter. Bring the mic up. Hey. We'll do a dual presentation.
No.
Don't stab me, though, all right?
I left my jacket at home. So Magento 1, it was interesting, came along. I used to do a lot of training back when I worked for a living. And it was interesting, like, if you look at what happened in PHP, like, in 2007, because I had to deal with this shit, because I started going to PHP events before I even joined Magento, and I was like the only guy there talking about Magento. If you're wearing a Magento logo in like 2010 or 2012, and you walk into a PHP conference, Magento logo on your shirt, you have people will come up and they will say some vicious things to you for someone who's like that you've never met. Right. But what I found was that they were always like, someone would come up and they would say, F Magento. And I'd say, okay, why? And they'd say, well, because of this. And I'd say, well, commerce ain't easy. So you have this complexity, you have this, and then, but then inevitably you have things like, why isn't there test coverage? I'm like, were you covering your PHP apps in tests?
Who knows the real reason?
I'll leave it to you. But I think it was because we had to catch up. There were a lot of people who didn't touch Composer until after Magento 2 came out.
Exactly. It was a much simpler time. The tech stacks, relative to the tech stack at the time, Magento 1 was overly complex. It was a steep learning curve, and the performance was bad. And we look back on Magento 1 and we say, oh, wow, it runs really great. Well, yeah, we're using 5 CPUs that are 5 years advanced and running faster. We've understand how to solve the performance issues. Extension vendors had time to fix all of the bugs and issues in their extensions and go through multiple versions. And so I went to Twitter, because again, I'm a big social media influencer. And Sergey, he was one of 3 engineers working on it at the time. So since the very beginning in late 2010, Magento 1 was becoming not maintainable and not testable without automated tests. Unit testing was architecturally impossible, and a tech stack was outdated. But that was Zen Framework 1 to 2, I believe, right? And without the test, they needed test coverage for CI/CD. And that makes sense. Magento 1 started out new, and it grew, and it grew, and it grew, and all these new features came, and it was unmaintainable, and they needed to test it. Documentation and opening up repository for community contributions were other goals of Magento 2. So without automated tests and underlying architecture advances, it would be impossible to control incoming contributions. Think back when Magento 1 was open source, there was no open source project. There was no GitHub. You couldn't go in, file issues, see bugs. It was very closed source. You couldn't access it, you couldn't contribute to it. But over that time period, Git became very popular. GitHub became hugely popular to host open source projects. And then they came out with nice tools to manage commits, bugs, issues, PRs, all of that. And that's what they needed to get to. And they needed people, they wanted the community to contribute to it, but they needed a way to do the automated testing. So M1 backwards compatibility policy was vague and too strict, which resulted in years of accumulating overcomplicated code changes, obscuring the code base. Major version M2 was necessary to break the backwards compatibility and clean up the code base. So why is there a bunch of old Magento 1 code in Magento 2? Because they wanted to keep the backwards compatibility, and they also wanted feature parity. And by the way, Sergey was one of three working on M2. But yeah, he said it was 3 of us for a few years. Then we added 2 more members and the team, and then it expanded. It exploded into 5 and more M2 teams. So Martin says that's some good insights, but what was the original thought regarding functionality? That was to port every feature and stay as close as possible to M1, and if so, why? So the initial intent was one-to-one feature parity, but they had some problematic modules, and they had to rewrite them, such as staging, and that needed to be completely rewritten. So they started out and they were like, you know what, we want full backwards compatibility. But the policy, it was strict, but vague. The developers were a little bit confused. They were porting code over. Because again, think about how many features were in M1, and now you want to go to M2 with complete feature parity and rewrite it all, and rewrite all these tests for it, give all this coverage to it, make it publicly available. That's a huge, huge endeavor. And along the way, they realized that they just couldn't do it. So if Magento 2 started out to do automated testing, Mark Lewis is over there and he's thinking, when I'm thinking, what you're thinking, what we're all thinking, all right, well, where's all the bugginess come from? Especially pre-2.3. Too much reliance on unit tests, not enough acceptance testing, more complicated stacks, something else. He says, in his experience running M2 in production, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 are equally stable. Earlier 2.0 versions weren't ready, but the business had to call it GA. Again, it was vaporware for so long. Primera had spun them out. Paul Boisvert dropped the mic. They had to release GA. Until you release GA, you don't get the momentum and traction for the extension vendors, for the developers. Nobody's going to build on it. So you have to get it out there in GA. But the issue is the quality issues stem from testing framework and test suite being written from scratch 3 to 4 times. TAF, MTF, MFTF. Like our own hosting control panel, we wrote that at least 3, maybe 4 times from scratch. I know everybody in here has written projects over and over from scratch. You've probably built stores where you're like, shit, that really needs a rebuild. For whatever reason, budget constraints, maybe you know better things now, or the client shifted the project requirements on you. So after I read Sergey's tweets, I really didn't, I thought, man, that kind of makes a lot of sense. I don't remember any of that messaging along the way. I had just really hated it because a hosting provider, we're dealing with constant bugs. We have the security problem where you have to upgrade to get to the new version, you get security updates, which, by the way, Telesh, where's Telesh at? There he is. We're working with the security team to change that, talking about maybe a 2.x.x.x version patch. and doing, I don't know if anybody saw the auto updater tweets that we had going on. That was a pretty hot topic. I don't think the auto updater will come right away, but we need to prove that we can do this patching. And Martin and I had done that patching for Magento 1 on our hosting. Again, that was one of the things we had to adapt our hosting for. When Magento in the beginning, there was not a lot of security updates. And then all of a sudden, it was security update, security update, security update. And so we built into our hosting platform the ability to auto-patch all these security updates. And we want to bring that back into Magento 2. So I think having read Sergey explain that, like all the hatred in my heart for Magento 2, it really faded away. Like, that makes sense. I've been through that. I understand those struggles as a business owner, as a project manager, as a software developer. So I told him, I said, thank you. That's exactly what I was searching for, and what's your opinion on the current state and the future state? So it's a tough question, especially in light of PWA. We all know the struggles with PWA. I think it's the biggest pain point of M2 is front-end tech stack. If transition to PWA succeeds in displacing the theming framework, M2 will be an absolute pleasure to work with. Less enterprisey, PHP would be great, but with Adobe in the mix, obviously that's unrealistic. So with PWA, and I'm going to blame the front-end developers here. Who's the front-end? Yes, is the front-end developer. You guys. I mean, come on. Like, do we need more JavaScript frameworks? Like, the world does not need another JavaScript framework, okay? Like, the CSS, less Sass, you're compiling CSS now. Like, if you wanted to be a programmer, like, be a programmer. Like, so now you're compiling all these things and breaking all these changes. But we all know the struggle with PWA is that it's not ready yet. PWA Studio isn't ready yet. You do have alternate options. You have Vue Storefront. You also have Deity. Or you can build on the existing theme. PWA, while it is coming, my understanding is there's a substantial amount of features underneath it that need to be completed. So that is what needs to happen. PWA needs to accelerate and speed up and get to release. And I think at that point, Magento will be in a much, much better position. Mark Lavelle, he was asked, what was your biggest regret? Looking back, what was your biggest regret? And his biggest regret was not getting to market fast enough. And that's what's happening here with PWA. You really need to accelerate it. You really need to get it to market. And once that happens and stabilizes, Magento will be in a really, really good spot. So that's it. Thank you to Marsha Naidu, Jordan, and our MCs. Let's see if I can remember. So we have Kelly, Marsha, thank you. Let's see, we had Rob, Dan, and Quentin, and Kelly. Always amazing, Kelly. Thank you for emceeing. And thank you to everybody here. I hope you had good talks. We had many PWA talks. We had the Wednesday PWA. We had the hackathon. Then the Magento team was here to do QA. Thank you for coming here and answering questions. We had Demian from Google was here to do an advanced PWA talk. We had the PWA panel. So we've had lots of opportunities for everybody to learn more about PWA and the future state of Magento. So thank you, everybody, and hope to see you in 2020. Is Cheryl here? Can I say this? If Cheryl's not around, we're the largest conference, and there she is. Don't look, Cheryl. All right, thank you, everybody.